So it's a pleasure and a covet to have for us HaRav Dovid Heber to discuss practical problems, bayot, and halacha that arise in these inyanim on Shabbos, Bishul v'oid. HaRav Dovid.
Thank you very much. Yashikach to you, Rabbi Gassman, for organizing the shir, and Bishul Rav Heinemann Shlita. It's a big schus to be able to work by Rav Heinemann and learn so many things from him, and even some of the Piskei Dinim will be some of the things that I've learned from him over the years. I understand the Oil was learning the Dinim of Shehiyah, and I wanted to elaborate on some of those halachas and then get into some other inyanim regarding minyan linim b'oisa inyan of Shehiyah and Hilchos Shabbos as well. So of course the inyan of Shehiyah of Chazal is well known, and of why we have Shehiyah. Chazal were afraid that if you put something up before Shabbos begins, so you're going to go ahead and stir the coals. If it's not cooked properly, if it's not fully cooked, or it's not even cooked halfway or a third way, as we'll talk about in a moment, then Chazal were afraid. So in order to avoid this problem, they said it has to be grufa ketuma, which means that the fire is covered, the coals are covered over. You can't cook, you can't come to stir the coals, or it's nisvashal kamaycha b'jusoy, which means it's cooked either halfway or a third of the way. So we'll elaborate on that in a moment. But nowadays, of course, the famous issue is we typically don't cook on a barbecue on Friday night, which would be a classic grufa ketum of covering the coals. That's not how we cook. We have a regular oven, or we're talking about a stove top. So of course, the grufa ketuma is this kayim ayidei a blech. We cover the flame with a blech as well as cover the knobs. In other words, our means of making something higher is by turning up the knob. So those are the basics of Shehiyah. So when Shabbos begins, your food, which you're cooking, either Meikar Adin needs to be one of two things. Either you need the flame covered and the knobs covered so that you cannot turn up the flame, or it needs to be cooked, it needs to be cooked either a third, if it's a third, or a half. And either of those will suffice. Of course, the price can bring down, ideally, it should be fully cooked with a blech, then you avoid other potential problems. But Meikar Adin, you need either a third or a half, or it's enough to have it's machlokes a third or a half, or it's enough to have the flame which is covered and the knobs covered. Now, how do you calculate kamaycha ben jusai? What does that mean when we say that it's a half or a third? What does it mean, a half or a third? If you ask about basta, you say when is it halfway cooked? What does that mean exactly? What are we driving at? We know the sprach, a half or a third. It's a very important question. If it's negel maisa, if it's Erev Shabbos and the food is on the flame and you don't have a blech, so how much does the food have to be cooked? How do I reach Michael ben Jusai? How do I reach a third of what? A half of what? So the Chazon Ish and Simon Lamazayin of Cotton Vav says it's either a third or a half against machlokes of the time it takes to cook from the time it's yad seiledes until the time it's fully cooked. That is your gauge. Let's give a mashal here. Let's say you have a food on the flame and it takes an hour to cook. It takes an hour. Now, when you ask the balabasta how long does it take to cook, they're going to tell you an hour. She's going to say from the time she put it on the flame, if you put it up at 6 o'clock, it's going to be ready at 7 o'clock. But that's not where the clock starts. You start it when it reaches yad seiledes. So if you put a pot of food on the flame, and now it takes 15 minutes for the food inside to reach yad seiledes, so it doesn't reach yad seiledes until 6:15. That's where you're cheshbening Michael ben Jusai. So now it's cooking between 6:15 and 7 o'clock. You now have a 45-minute zman of cooking. That's really what it's cooking. Before that, it was just prepping. It was just reaching yad seiledes. So your cook time is from 6:15 to 7. That is 45 minutes. So now we have machlokes. What is kamaycha ben jusai? Either a third is enough. So a third of 45 is going to be 15. So if I reach yad seiledes at 6:15, a third cook will be at 6:30. So now a third cook will be good. So if let's say shkia is at 6:30, and I want this food to be kamaycha ben jusai by the time shkia comes, so I'm good to go because I'll put it up at 6 o'clock. it's going to reach Yatzaledis at 6:15. 6:30, it's going to reach Kameichel Ben Jusai. So very good. That's good. Now, if you're machmir, l'chayra, once you machmir like to Rishayim that hold, you need half cooked. So half of 45 minutes is going to be, let's say, 23 minutes. So what's 23 minutes after 6:15? You get 6:38 roughly, 6:37 and a half, whatever it is. And now it's not going to be Kameichel Ben Jusai until it's halfway between the time it reaches Yatzaledis and the time it is fully cooked. Now the Kaf HaChaim, it's in Rishon and Gimel. So Chav Ches gives a different gauge, and he says that it's really ein anu bekiyim. We're not really bekiyim. You see the Rishonim argue: is it a half? Is it a third? Yesh l'shayer kol shenechal ayidei hadchak. You know what Michael Ben Jusai means? Michael Ben Jusai means if it's nechal ayidei hadchak, would you eat it if you're stuck? Who were Ben Jusai? Everybody knows they were a bandit. And they were always on the run, so they can only cook their food part of the way. Everybody knows that about the Ben Jusai. That's all we know really about Ben Jusai, right? How are they zaycha to make it into Shas? I'm not sure, but everybody knows that this is what that's called. They made it into the gauge, into a very important halacha l'maisa. But we don't really know what does that mean exactly? It really means to mimic what is considered. What would the Ben Jusai have eaten it right here? If you take a raw chicken and you stick it in the oven for 5 minutes, and the kid comes home from school and says, "Mommy, I'm hungry," would she pull out the food and say, "Okay, here's the chicken"? Of course not. The kid would look at it, or an adult would say, "Oh, this is horrible. No one would touch it after 5 minutes." That's not a cooked chicken. That's not Ben Jusai. Even Ben Jusai wouldn't have eaten it at that point. It has to be, it has to be fully cooked. Gishmak, the way you want to eat something is gishmak. It's fully cooked. Called sarchai, the way you would serve it. No, it doesn't have to be that far either. Chazal meant, Michael Ben Jusai, the Kaf HaChaim is saying, is that when would someone eat it al yidei hadchak? If you were stuck, if this is what you had to eat, and this is all you had, or this is what you need to serve right now, would you eat it or not? Right? If you would eat it al yidei hadchak, then that's considered Michael Ben Jusai. If you wouldn't touch it, again, if all you had is a raw chicken, that's all you have tonight, you wouldn't eat it. You can't eat it. It's inedible. So that's not Michael Ben Jusai. 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, it has to be something which would be nechal yidei chak. Fine. Now, the shaila we're going to talk about, or something. One of the first shaila I want to talk about are crock pots. The crock pots, of course, are typically used to make cholent. Right? There are two ways to make cholent. One is on the stove, the old-fashioned way. You put meat and potatoes and barley, etc., on the stove, and you put a blech on. And that's one way. So there you need al shihiyah. You want it to be, again, l'chol hapach is cooked. Either you have a blech or it's cooked kameichel ben jusai. What about a crock pot? Crock pot, the shaila is, let's say it's not fully cooked, or it's not even halfway cooked, it's not a third cooked, it's not kameichel ben jusai, and now Shabbos begins. So how do you cover the crock pot? How you cover it? First of all, is that considered covered or not? So there's a machlekes hapaiskim here. Ideally, one should cover the knobs. Some would say you have to cover the knobs. That's the ikar grufa ketuma, and therefore that's good enough. Once you cover the knobs, the shaila is: are you mekayem this din of grufa ketuma by covering the fire by not doing anything? So there's a shaila in the paiskim here. Some say that, well, it's covered. What's the flame of a crock pot? The flame of a crock pot is the electricity, the coils that are going through underneath the cheres, underneath within the pot. You have it's a kli cheres. In the cheres, I'm sorry, you have the cheres itself is cheres. You put the cheres onto a chamber which it's covered by metal, and you have wires that go through the metal. The wires get to very high temperature, and that heats the crock pot. So some say it's grufa ketuma automatically. As soon as you buy the crock pot, this vessel, this chamber, which is holding on, this casing, the metal casing, which is holding the crock pot, is already automatically grufa ketuma. It's the flame's covered. The flames, the wires are covered. Others disagree. Others are the opinion that no, that's not the case. That one second. The natural way, this is the fire. The fire is the chamber. The fire is the casing where you put the crock pot in. So that's not grufa ketuma, that's not covered. To cover it, you need to cover it with aluminum foil. Now you're covering the fire. The fire is the entire chamber itself. Either wires are covered, so what, mabakach? That's the natural way. And once that's the natural way, that's considered the flame, and now you would need to cover it with aluminum foil. Now, so Mikar Din, what does a person do here? So first of all, again, we have to speak out that if your cholent is already cooked halfway when Shabbos begins, then you certainly don't need to cover the crock pot with foil. You want to cover the knob, ideally, because you want to try to be mahader. But the reason by shehiyah, the problem with shehiyah is you might come to stir the coals. So here, if you cover the knob, the coals, which is the wires, are already covered. You can't stir them up to make them hot. So for purposes of shehiyah, there are many poskim that say you don't need to cover it with foil. Again, we're talking now about the shehiyah issue here. We're not talking about there's a hatmana issue, which I'm not going to get into when we say hatmana on a crock pot. But on the shehiyah issue, you don't have that problem. I want to contrast that with chazara, right? Again, there's not a shir chazara, but one nakuda of chazara is that when you do chazara, you have to have the flame covered. In order to, if you take you take water off the flame and you want to put it back on, you want to pour yourself some coffee or water for coffee, and now you want to put it back on the flame. In that case, you have all the tanam of chazara. One of them is the flame has to be covered. There, you need a blech. You cannot put back the pot onto a fire straight. That's an isra of chazara. You don't meet the condition of a covered flame. In that case, there's a bigger reason to be machmir by chazara, meaning by a crock pot. What do I mean? When Shabbos begins, you have only dealing with shehiyah. If the knob is covered, there's no grufa ketuma anymore. You can't turn it up, and you can't stir the wires. So you're done, right? It's already grufa ketuma. You're 100% fine. Even technically, even if it was only cooked a tenth of the way, you wouldn't have a problem because you have a grufa ketuma already. The knob's covered, the flame is covered. By chazorah, there's a bigger inyan of covering the blech. Of covering the crock pot. Why? Chazara has a second reason. The second reason by chazara is not only because we might come, when you put it back, you're going to come to stir the coals. It's also mechzik mavashal. When you take a urn, or you take a hot water off the flame, and you pour yourself a coffee and you put it back, if you put it back on a flame, that looks like you're cooking. That's mechzik mavashal. Chazal said you need a blech. Can't do it without a blech. There's a bigger svar if you want to take cholent Friday night, and you want to take it out of the crock pot. Take it out of the crock pot, you want to scoop it out, you want to put it back in. There's a stronger reason to want to have foil in your crock pot, because that's mechzik mavashal. Because the normal way of cooking in a crock pot is putting it straight down onto the metal, which is covering the coils. So it's covering the electricity, covering the wires. In that case, by chazara, you have the added reason of mechzik mavashal, and therefore you need foil more than by shehiyah. So the bottom line is, again, the chukah day is across the board here. But l'maisa, there's a strong svara to say that for a crock pot, just for shehiyah purposes, you don't need foil. Talking about now for purpose of shehiyah, and for chazara you do, because for chazara it's mechzik mavashal, and for shehiyah it's not, and therefore technically it's enough to cover the crock pot. Now, agav, I want to point out that there's another important nekuda by shehiyah, which Shabbos Chachasa brings down. I don't know if it's commonly known, but by the Rabbi Shuchman, Moshe Shuchman, who works with me in the Star K, wrote a wonderful article on cholent, and he gets into Inyanim of Chazara in the article. He points this out from Shabbos Chachasa, which is available online, and it's cholent. You could find it in the Star K website, star-k.org, where it's an article on cholent, and he speaks about all the inyanim of cholent, adding to it, which is other inyanim of adding klirisha and adding spices and so on. But one of the issues that he speaks about chazara and shehiyah and so on. Agav, he mentions an interesting point. The shirish of the word cholent is from the French word of chalant, which is something hot. Cholent, we always use the word cholent. Yiddish is a mixture. It's a ganze cholent. It means a mixture. But the shirish of the word cholent seems to come from the French word, which is hot. And very interesting, he points out that there's an English word which we say, something is nonchalantly. When you did something nonchalantly, that means you did it, very, very easygoing, almost in a cold manner, right? Nonchalantly. So that's the nonchalantly means it's not chalant, right? It wasn't done hot, but it's done in an agavdik kind of cold manner. So that's nonchalant is the opposite of the shayr. The word nonchalant is from the opposite of the shayrish of chalant. But anyway, he points out, Shmir Shabbos Chachasa says that no matter what you use to make your chalant with, for purpose of shahiyah, you're going to cover the knob. You want to go ahead and you want to show that you have no more interest in adjusting the temperatures. So once you cover it, you don't want to fiddle with it. Meaning, if a person, let's say, did shahiyah and he put a piece of tape on his crock pot, which is you tape the knob, so that's good enough. In other words, you could pull off the knob, or you could put a tape on it, and that means you're not going to turn it up. L'maisa though, if you tape the knob and you're busy turning up and down the knob before Shabbos, that's indicative that the tape is worthless, right? The tape is there to tell you you can't turn it up, right? You don't turn it up. But a lot of times the tape is not on so tight. So what you do is the balabasta will make the chalant, or the balabas, you make the chalant, now you want it on high until Shabbos begins. But you want to make sure you have the tape on, you want to cover the knob with a piece of tape. So you put it on high, you put the tape on it, and now 15 minutes before Shabbos, you flip it to low with the tape on it. You've just demonstrated that the tape is not really a covering of the knob. Shabbos Klasa brings this in Chelik Aleph, Perak Aleph. He brings it in two places, Ois Nun Daled and Ois Kuf Pei Hey, where your cover needs to be a meaningful cover. So the bottom line is, if you want to fiddle with the knobs right up to Shabbos, so as you want to move it from high to low, which is very common, don't put the tape on until after you turn it to low. Because if you put the tape on, I want to put it on early. I want to make sure that it's good. I don't want to forget the tape. Well, if you're not using the tape anyway, you're just fiddling under the tape, then in that Echitimsa, you've kind of destroyed your shahiyah, and you're showing that your cover is worthless, and therefore, again, you want to do as we said. Now, Derech Agav, this is not really a halachic shaila, but it is a halachic shaila. But I want to say it's mutter, but it's more of an eitzah. But l'maisa, it's mutter to do this, and it's negeya this coming Shabbos. Very negeya this coming Shabbos. This coming Shabbos, of course, is the beginning of what we call the Chutz La'aretz, a 3-day yontiv, and even in Eretz Yisrael, they have a 2-day yontiv. Their Shavuos is going to be till Sunday night, and in Chutz La'aretz, of course, our yontiv of Shavuos is going to go until Monday night. So a lot of people are going to want to make a chalant the regular way with a crock pot. So on a normal Shabbos, you put it in the crock pot, and it stays plugged in the wall. You pull out the insert, Shabbos 12 o'clock, you serve the chalant, and the insert sits for until Motzei Shabbos, at which point you plug it, you unplug it, and then you put it away. The problem now is you have a 2-day yontif, you have yontif. So you're going to serve the chalant at 12:30, 1 o'clock on Shabbos afternoon, and that crock pot is going to sit there heated for another 57 hours or so. It's going to be 48 hours to 1 o'clock, another 8 hours, right? It's going to be 56, 57 hours. It's going to sit, and it's already hot, right? It's supposed to be in the 80s on yontif. So, and you already have an oven that's running a whole yontif. So who wants a crock pot that's sitting in the kitchen, that's generating heat, that's not that's just stop wasting electricity, generating heat in a hot kitchen already, and just an appliance that's generating heat for no reason. So what's the eitzah? You can't turn it off, right? You can't turn it off. Rav Heinrich just spoke about the technology. There's no heter to turn off an electrical device, to turn it on to off. It's generating. It's bringing electricity. There's no heter to turn it off. So what's the eitzah? Even Eretz Yisrael, it's going to be 1 day. They have till Sunday night. What do they need it running from 1 o'clock till Sunday night? By them, it's going to be 32 hours of wasted heat running through the kitchen. So the teretz is you could. It's mutter to set it on a timer. It's mutter to set it on a timer. I want to talk about this Shabbos. I don't want to confuse you, but the other direction is also mutter. This is really more of a shahiyah question, and that is when Yontiv is Thursday and Friday, or even Yontiv is Friday and Shabbos. So you want to put up the chalant on Friday, So you want it to go on Friday afternoon. So let's say Yom Tov Thursday, Friday. So you want to put a crock pot on Wednesday afternoon so that 2 days later you put the cholent in. Friday at 2 o'clock you put it in so that it's ready Shabbos morning. It sits Yoshev Doimim for 48 hours. Who wants to do that? Have heat for 2 extra days. So the 3-day Yom Tov, next Pesach, Habaleno Toiva, will be Thursday, Friday. So you have the same issue. Can I turn off the crock pot? Can I turn on the crock pot? The answer is no. But you could put it on a timer. It's mutter in both directions. You could have a timer trip it off, and you can have a timer trip it on. So again, since this Shabbos is tripping off, just to go through how to trip it off. One eitzah is they sell timers that work for a week. I actually own a timer that's a 7-day timer. You can actually turn it on. I think it goes in 4-hour increments, and you have it on, and you have it on from Friday till Shabbos, and Shabbos at some point it trips off and then stays off until Monday night when you unplug it and pull it off. You put the rest of the pins on. So that's very simple. You put the on pins on Friday afternoon till Shabbos afternoon, and then it trips off. What if you don't own a 7-day timer? So what do you do? So what you can do is like this. Again, this is more of an eitzah than a halacha, but anytime between 3 p.m. and 8 p.m. on Friday afternoon. Again, if you make early Shabbos, obviously you want to do this before early Shabbos. So anytime between 3 p.m. and 6:30 p.m., you go ahead and you plug in your crock pot with the timer. The timer, you need a timer that has the old pins, that have the green pins and the red pins. You can't use a timer that's by hour. It's not going to work. Where 1 o'clock is on, 2 o'clock is on, 3 o'clock is off. It has to be the timers that have the red pins and the green pins. Those that have the very old timers, they used to be black pins and red pins. Right? The very old timers where red pins were on, black pins were off. But for the last 25 years, it's the green pin which turns on and the red pin which turns off. You have 2 pins in the timer. You have the red pin is at 1 p.m. and the green pin is at 2 p.m. You go ahead and you spin the timer to the time it is right now, 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m. It's on right now because you had put the green pin in at 2 p.m. You then pull the green pin out, and that's it. You're set to go because what you've done is you've turned on the crock pot, you've turned on the timer with the 2 p.m. pin. You now set it for, let's say it's 4 p.m. You move the dial to 4 p.m. You now have the crock pot on. You remove the green pin. We're talking about now on Erev Shabbos. You put the green pin in a safe place the next time, and now you have 1 pin in the timer, and that is 1 p.m. So what's going to happen is it's going to spin on. You're going to serve your cholent 12 o'clock, 12:30, and then click. At 1 p.m. it's going to click off. There's no green pins in it, and now your Shabbos clock is off, and now your crock pot is off. So that's just an eitzah toiva. In dealing with the other way around, of course, it's fakert. If you want to put it up for Friday and you want to do this on Wednesday, you would leave the green pin in at the right time to go on, and then you'd have it off until it trips on. In that case, it would go on Friday afternoon. It may go on Thursday afternoon, which is certainly better than going on Friday. Okay.
Can I ask a question, HaRav?
Yes.
Are we now therefore assuming as a halacha psuka that the use of timers, which Ramesha was dubious about at the beginning, and which Klal Yisrael Pukhazi was naig lahakel for lights and air conditioners? Do we now assume that we're expanding this to cooking implements without a problem? That's the
the meaning of oilam has become the meaning of oilam has become to use timers, except for dvarim that are avsha milsa. In other words, you can't put on you want music to play. For those ending svira, they get the chance to hear music on Shavuos. They want to play music. That would be avsha milsa. Or you want I don't know if Tesla makes a vacuum cleaner that doesn't need a human being running it, but I'm sure they exist. You want a vacuum cleaner to go on a timer and vacuum your home after the Seder would be very convenient, where all the matzah that ended up on your carpeting, that l'chayra would be osir because of avsha milsa. But l'chayra, a timer that's tripping on dvarim that are not avsha milsa, that are not noisemakers, that are things that are rugil to be on anyway. So in other words, a crock pot is on anyway when Shabbos begins. So the fact you're tripping it on a timer, l'chayra would even fit into the usage where we do use timers, namely air conditioners and the like. again, the Shabbos mode ovens Rav Heinemann spoke about, without getting into some of the pratim of that. But one of the features was the inyan of time bake, where the oven trips off. So you see ovens are even built, with various timers to go off on Shabbos. So Kal v'chomer, certainly Kal v'chomer, this yontif for the timer will be no worse than time bake. I want my crockpot to stay until Shabbos afternoon. Is no worse than any Shabbos mode oven that has time bake, trip it off. Huadin, the ovens could go on. Obviously for Shabbos, you're running into issues. But Rav Heinemann has even spoken about coffee makers, tripping on with on Shabbos morning with timers and so on. That I'm not going to get into right now. But l'maisa, the minig is to if you, as long as you're not being mavashal on Shabbos, the timer could go on. And Kavachimer Yontif, where you're allowed to cook, again, the case of Yontif Thursday, Friday, and I want the timer to go on so that I could be mavashal. L'maisa, the minig oilam is to be megal.
So beginning to the one last question, beginning to this Yontif, where a lot of people will be using these new warmers, relatively new warmers. So Lamaisa, one can put them all on a timer and have the warmer, as long as obviously the warmer is not designed to cook, it's designed to keep warm, go off and on whatever schedule you wish. Is that
correct?
Am I understanding correctly?
Correct. For Yontif, in other words, let's say you don't need the warmer Shabbos. In other words, let's say by us, we don't have a typical Shabbos. We don't keep an oven on. We have a crock pot. We have a hot water maker. An urn, and that's the only two hot items that we need in the house. So I'm saying a regular Shabbos, right? A regular Shabbos. So let's say the Balabasta wants to fears like a regular Shabbos. She doesn't want her oven on, but she wants things on warmers, so she could have a timer that trips it on, Shavuos night, or let's say they're not home Shavuos night. They're not coming home till the first day, second day. You could have a timer that's going to trip it on that'll allow you, or put on a bake system, time bake or whatever it is, to go ahead and to trip on Yontif and then go ahead and cook without a problem. That l'chara would be 100% mutter, not a problem.
There's a question here from the floor, HaRav.
Yes.
Speak loud, please.
String chazara, a family that wants cholent, let's say, every meal. So now we have a Shabbos afternoon. We'll take the pot off, take some cholent, and what are we going to do? We're going to put the pot back on. We're allowed to put it back on the stove. And then, even though it's on the stove, because tonight, when does it, we are going to want hot cholent. So, going from Shabbos to Yom Tov preparation, Chazorah, is there any issues involved that way?
I mean, that's not so pasha. That gets into an issue of you're not supposed to cook. It's not so pasha to cook over Shabbos from Motzei Shabbos Stam. There's an issue of if someone, let's say, wants a cholent, let's say, Mam Malka, I want a cholent from Mam Malka, I'll make a separate pot. Not so pasha, you could do that. It's problematic. In other words, hot water we can use over Shabbos. I don't put up hot water for Motzei Shabbos, but there is an issue of cooking on Erev Shabbos that you let it run all the way up until Motzei Shabbos. So l'chayra chazara might be an issue as well. Kavachaymer, I think if you want to put that cholent back on al das that you're using it Motzei Shabbos. In other words, if you're putting al das shal shudas, that's fine. But if you're putting it back on the flame, it's even worse problem that you want it on Motzei Shabbos. I think that's going to be an issue. I'm not familiar with that case, but I would venture to guess it's a problem because the heter of chazara is you need the food for Shabbos. I want to eat cholent Friday night so that put it back so I have cholent Shabbos morning. I want to take put my shining back or put the water back on the flame after you drink a coffee Shabbos morning because you're going to want a tea by dessert on Shabbos afternoon. But stam to put it back, al das, that it's being used for Motzei Shabbos, I think that's going to be a problem. I once asked Klevsky's Atzal Shaila. This is Negeya, we're talking Hachana here. And I've seen Chulkadeis on this, but Klevsky, my Rebbe's Atzal, Shiva Ner Yisrael, Nachmash Klevsky, when I was newly married, I called him with a Shaila. My wife was making Shavuos Grata, and she asked me, for the second night of Yontif, she wants to take something out of the freezer Yontif morning. And it was the second night of Shavuos. She cooked something. She's only serving it the second night of Yontif, and it's in the freezer. She cooked it a week ago. but she doesn't need. She doesn't want to take it out erev Yontif. First, take Kavachimer this year, where you're gonna take it out Friday because you want it on Sunday night, right? It's gonna spoil. Even Friday, even erev Yontif for the second night. So she asked me, because she'd take it out on Yontif morning. Take it out of the freezer, right, and put it out, or Yontif afternoon. So
Yontif Rishon, let's make it clear. Yontif
Rishon, exactly. You want to take out Yontif Rishon for Yontif Sheni. You want to take it out Sunday morning for Sunday night. So Klevsky told me not to do it. That applies hachana, even though it's not such a difficult hachana, but you're doing this l'shem tonight, it's not a problem. So my wife's eitzah was, what she does is she takes it out of the freezer and puts it in the fridge, right, on erev Yontif, right? In other words, this way it thaws out, and therefore comes the second night of Yontif. It's not a frozen block of something that's going to take, till Chatzais Halayla to cook, and therefore it's already thawed out, and now it's ready to cook, and it'll be ready. It'll be ready Yontif Sheni. I got Leil Yontif Sheni. There's always somebody, I give a shiur always between the first night and the second night. There's always someone that says, go overtime, because the balabas is not ready, right? They're not ready to eat the food. You have to give them time. I get sometimes a shaila. Someone just sent me a shaila. They emailed me the shaila. They want to, how early could they make Yontif Sheni, right? This is somebody alone a certain place. How early could they eat the Suda? So you get into shailas, could you make early Yontif Sheni? Okay, so next year it's Friday night, it's a Shabbos. But this year it's Sunday night. There's one biggest problem with making Yontif Sheni early. You can't cook, right? In other words, you can't cook for Yontif Rishon, Yontif Sheni. So forget about the davening early, it's mutter davening early, Shavuos, second night, all those in Yonim. If you would daven Ma'ariv early on this Yontif Sheni and go home, you can't eat yet until Tzeisek HaChavim, but you can't even eat Tzeisek HaChavim because you have to first start preparing for Yontif Sheni. You have to Tzeisek HaChavim. So if everyone comes home because you daven Ma'ariv early, there's nothing to eat, right? Nothing to eat, and it's late. It's already late. Nothing to eat. So Al Strachmanis to the balabas to give her a little bit of time to get the food ready. You want to be able to have that.
Right. I mean, I think Dalim should. You can't even set the table. You can't do anything. You can't take out cold food that doesn't require cooking.
Exactly. You can't set the table.
Okay, one last question here. Since the Rav opened the door here on Afsha Milsa, so somebody asked here a question. What do you mean I can't use my electronic vacuum cleaner, which Rav should know, by the way, is very nafutz now in Klal Yisrael, these little robot vacuum cleaners. Yes. So he wants to know why it's different than asking the shiksa to clean up, after
vacuum
after
cleaner.
Sweep the floor.
Someone this morning just asked me a shiloh. They have a cleaning lady every Monday. So Monday, second day Yontif, could the cleaning lady come? Okay, assume they'll pay after Yontif or before Yontif, right? They'll make those arrangements. But Lemais, it's good to have a cleaning lady. The cleaning lady could do anything that you're allowed to do in an easier oifen. I'll get to the punchline in a second, but let me just tell you how I answer the shaila. You're allowed to clean the floor, but you have to clean the floor on Yontif in a very inconvenient manner. You have to take water, pour it on the sticky spot. Someone spilled soda on the floor. You could take water and you put some water down and wipe it up. And then there's some more spots to clean the whole floor. It's going to take you can take it 2 hours, right? But okay, that's why you don't clean the floor in Yontif. Maybe you clean the sticky spots where the spills were. But the cleaning lady could clean in a way that's more convenient for her. She's not interested in pouring a cup of water and then wiping it away with a shmata. She wants to mop. So it's mutter for her to mop the floor, right? You could say clean the floor, as long as you don't say mop the floor. You can't say to her mop the floor, because you can't mop. That's a milakam. You can't ask her to mop the floor. You can ask her to clean the floor. Now she's cleaning the floor in a more convenient manner. That's her business. Ataita nafshe. That's her business. But she can't do things that are avsha milsa. She can't do something that makes noise. A cleaner is not allowed to vacuum. She cannot vacuum on Yontif or Shabbos because a vacuum cleaner is avsha milsa. It makes noise, and therefore it's a noisemaker, and it's something that makes noise. Now, something where the derech is to make noise in a house on Shabbos is mutter. So an alarm clock could go off. The phone, you have to close the telephones. The phone's allowed to ring. It's not a problem. But l'maisa, the minig is not to, or air conditioners, which are yodua, are on from before Shabbos or with a timer. So those are mutter. But if you can't have a vacuum cleaner run, right, or dishwashers also, or laundry, right? All these things are avsha milsa. It's not bakavadik for Shabbos to have these noise items that are vachtika items to be running, even al yedei akum, and therefore l'chayra it would be a problem. Now I'm not gonna. This is a kshaf for behind him maybe, but l'maisa, if something becomes so ruggle that people are only cleaning things through their little mini zach, which does it, then it's going to blind an alarm clock. In other words, once alarm clocks became ruggle in homes, I have alarm clock goes off every morning, right? They're already ruggle, so therefore it goes off 7 days a week, right? It's part of the house. So loss is avshamilsa here. It's something that's just ruggle to go. Vacuum is not something ruggle, and therefore it's avshamilsa, and therefore l'chayra, it would be a problem. I want to move on to the next.
Even if theoretically it would be noiseless, it wouldn't make a difference at the moment. It's still avshamilsa.
L'chayra not. I mean, this gets into the shiloh with if you have noiseless dishwashers, right? I think the Pais could still call it avshamilsa, at least at this point. It's not so negaya dishwashers because you can't turn it on Shabbos, right? You can't turn it on Shabbos. Yontif though, you run into problems loading it and so on. If it goes on timers,
with the cleaning lady,
you're going to run into a problem. With the cleaning lady, turn it on, right? The cleaning lady will do it. I would think it's still a problem. Okay, now moving on to a famous halacha in the Gemara known as Kidra Chaisa. Kidra Chaisa is a pot, something which is raw, totally raw when Shabbos begins. In other words, it's interesting that it's so raw that we're going to be more makel. What's the pshat? It's the Gemara. A balbas puts up food an hour before Shabbos, and it's something that takes 4 hours to cook. So we're afraid that she's going to stir the coals because the company's coming. Everyone's coming home from shul. 2 hours after she put it up. This is something that needs 4 hours. We better get rolling here. So you're going to stir the coals. It's going to increase the heat, and instead of taking 4 hours, it'll take 3 hours. She'll stall them a little bit, and she'll serve, good cooked food. Fine. But if somebody, and therefore the Gzeir of Shehiyah, but if somebody puts something up 5 minutes, 10 minutes before Shabbos, right? So they're not serving it Friday night. You put up a raw chicken 5 minutes before Lichtzin. So what are you kidding? You're going to serve this Friday night? The men are coming home from shul soon, and it's not going to be ready. So it's clear, the Gemara means to say that your das this is for tomorrow. This meat, this chicken, this challah is for tomorrow. It's clear that's the case. No one puts up something raw to serve right away on a Tuesday afternoon, supper time in 20 minutes. You're putting a raw chicken in the oven? No, you're not serving supper in 20 minutes. It doesn't work. It's al karchis for tomorrow. So it's for tomorrow. So that's it. My das, I put it in, finished. Tomorrow morning, I'll take it out and serve it. That's known as Kidra Chaisa. Reb Henkin, and other paiskim, this brought in the Grus Eliyahu, Simon Samachas, said no. Nowadays, we don't have Kidra Chaisa. There are two reasons. I want to elaborate a little bit on the first reason. I'm going to get to the second reason in a minute. But I want to just still on the first reason. And that is, Reb Henkin writes, Zman Sheikha Eina Boru Lanu. We don't know the Zman Sheikha. Samach Sheikha Eina Boru. So in other words, we don't really know what Shki is. There's not a shir on Zmanim here. So we'll just give the basics here. But as everybody well known, there's machlokes when exactly is Shkia, how to calculate the Zman of Shkia, when it's Seisek Chavim. Right, you do a dik machlokes between the Goyinim and the Rabbeinu Tam, right? And the Goyinim was what we call sunset. That's when Shkia is. So we don't do Malacha. That Rabbeinu Tam held it's going to be later. It's going to be much later. So what's your Kidra Chaisa over here, right? What's your Kidra Chaisa? L'chayra, you're putting it up before what? Before Shkia, right? But which Shkia, right? So we don't know, right? Is it the later Shkia? So okay, we're makbid sunset. But you can't, maybe it's the later Shkia. So it's sad that it's the later Shkia and you're putting it up, Lichtzin is 7 o'clock, you're going to put it up at 5 to 7. Oh, Kidra Chaisa, right? Totally raw, no blech. It's for tomorrow, but the Shkia really, some hold Shkia is not till, in that case, till 8 o'clock at night. So that's not Kidra Chaisa anymore. By 8 o'clock, it's already partially cooked. And we're chayshish for group of 2. Now, I had a kasha on this for many years, and I found this in the footnotes of Grus Eliyahu, footnote number 393, he writes this, what Reb Henkin is saying is the loy kesefer told us Shmuel, Chelik Gimel. We're told us, I looked it up, they told us Shmuel, in Chelik Gimel, mitzvah Lamed Beis, Shalei Lasais B'locha B'Shabbos, it's Ois Gimel at the end. He wants to have a whole new taich in Kidra Chaisa. Stama, Joish Kibbutz Chayr, because we'll see in a moment that Lamaisa we're going to be machmer. It seems to be the Tol Shmuel is a das yachid in this, that the poship shot of Kiddush Chaisa means it's before Shkia, and Reb Henkin is saying that it means, we don't know in Shkia, so you have to be machmer. But Lamaisa, the Tol Shmuel says like this. He writes, Mesapka li im ksas b'nei beisei kfar kiblu aleim es ha-Shabbos. Uksas loy kiblu adayin. Some people were makabel, some weren't. It's Friday afternoon, especially in the summer. You have guests coming, so the Balabasta Ray made Shabbos. The daughter came in. They just came in. She needs a little more time. She's going to be Makabel Shabbos a bit later. Kikreini aminig kama piroyim. Sheish Makabel is taken by Lokas Haneris. Ba'al b'shar b'nei beis loy kiblu adayin es ha-Shabbos. They don't need guests, even if the husband's home. Let's say Dam Mincha G'dayla, and he's going to shul nach the Shkia. So the Balabasta was Makabel Shabbos at licht benching, 18, 20 minutes before Shkia. The husband is still running around doing malacha. The kids in the house weren't Makabel Shabbos either. Who do you go after? Venerally, the Ikar Taliba Isha Oya Misharsis Ukiyaitsabai, Shaoiskim Melechas Habishul, Umutal Aleim, Kichem Istaver, Shailu Adinim Tulian, Bohem Davka. K nearly Mekomach Tzarchian. Tol Shmuel is learning a whole different shot in Kiddush Chaisa. It's a din in when are you Makabel Shabbos? Which is really borders on this issue here. Reb Henkin is writing that Kiddush Chaisa is nowadays a problem because we don't know when Shkia is. Is it this Shkia? Is it that Shkia? Tol Shmuel is saying, let's look at the Isha here. Here's calling a Shaila. Do you go by the Balabas or do you go by the Balabasta? Who controls this din of Kiddush Chaisa? Do you want to put up something raw? Okay, Shkia lifts in at 7 o'clock. The Balabasta goes and 5 to 7. She says, "Oh, hey, I forgot to put up something for tomorrow." So she wants to put up something raw. There's no blech. It's 100% raw. Zokted told the Shmuel at Tzad that should be 100% mutter. But who would we go by? Maybe we should be machmir and say, 1 second. The husband, he wasn't Makabel Shabbos yet. In fact, he's davening a later minyan. She wants to be Makabel Shabbos. Let's make this a real life case here. He's davening a shikha later. He wants to be Makabel Shabbos the later minyan. She's Makabel Shabbos at Plaga Mincha. She finished already. She wants to relax. She's being Makabel. She's benching Lich at 7:15. The husband is going to shul at 8 o'clock. He's going to say Kabbalah Shabbos at 8:30. Who do you go by, her or him? She's not till 8:30. Zakta called the Shmuel. That's a Kiddush Chaisa. Why? Because the svar of Kiddush Chaisa is that you're not going to do Grufa Ketuma here. You're not going to stir the coals over here because it's Shabbos for you. You can't, right? You can't stir the coals anymore. It's 7:15. You bench licht. You're done. 5 minutes before that, you put up the raw chicken. You can't stir the coals. What are you worried? The husband's going to stir the coals? Well, it's not Shabbos for him yet. He's running around the house for the next hour, taking care of things. It's mutter for him. It's even mutter for the woman to ask him, as we'll see in a moment, when we speak about Amir La'akim and Amir Yisrael, who hasn't been Makabel Shabbos yet. So it's very Shmuel. Told Shmuel is timing that, and this is what the footnote, what Kleiman puts in the footnote. Like told Shmuel. Like told Shmuel, you don't have a problem with the shkiyas. Which shkiya? Who cares? It makes no difference. It's totally in me. It's totally in my wife. When is my wife benching licht? Kiddush Chaisa, 5 minutes before her licht benching is Kiddush Chaisa, and it should be mutter. And so L'maisa told Shmuel by Sarchian. He's just saying it misvara. But again, I had this kasha for many years until I saw this footnote. Why are we handling shkiya here? It's so what if Rabbeinu Tam holds shkiya is 58 and a half minutes later? What does that have to do with my Kiddush Chaisa? I'm not going to be Machal Shabbos then. I'm not going to stir the. I know you can't stir the coals once shkiya comes. So if my Kiddush Chaisa is 5 minutes before my Kabbalah Shabbos, what does Rav Henkin mean that we're worried about? We don't know when shkiya is. It's totally me. Al Kapanim, he told the Shmuel by Sarchian in the Sfara because he's saying a Chiddush. He's saying we don't. Right? No, you don't go. But Lamaisa, it's an interesting ha'ara on the chumrah of Kiddush Chaisa. It's a tzad lohokol in the din of Kiddush Chaisa. Al Kapanim, there's another Svara, which is why I left the second Svara out, and that is that there's some that taina the whole Kiddush Chaisa doesn't apply nowadays because our ovens cook too fast. And that is, in the olden days, what did they have? A barbecue grill, right? They had ovens which were diving to a barbecue grill. Yeah, they were sealed. You learned Kira, you're learning Masechta Shabbos. They were quick. But our ovens are so much more efficient. They're built in a way, they're so much more, the chamber, it's so much more efficient, it cooks much faster. Again, if we could give a mushal, what is the difference between turning on your flame to 350 degrees in an oven and making a barbecue at a picnic with a barbecue grill? It's in a daima the level of heat you're going to have. So therefore, there's those that want a tiny kiddush chayes doesn't apply nowadays, because you want to say, oh, the Baal Bas is putting up the chicken 5 minutes before lichtzin, and it's certainly not for tonight. Make it tasty. Our ovens are so efficient, certain foods they will cook. Again, obviously it depends on what you're cooking. Something takes a long time to cook. Either way. But l'maisa, many things cook quickly. And we have all sorts of contraptions that could cook. Pressure cooker, all sorts of ways of being misdares the process of the cooking, and therefore kiddush chayes doesn't apply. So even if you ask the kasha on Rav Henkin of the Tolda Shmuel, even if you want to go like the Tolda Shmuel, the tzad lahakal, you still cannot be makel and kiddush chayes nowadays because our ovens cook too fast, and therefore there's somewhat of a like plug that the whole kiddush chayes bisman hazeh doesn't apply because our ovens cook too fast, and therefore again we have two svaras. We asked the kasha on one svara to do away with kiddush chayes, but on the second svara l'chayra we still have, and therefore we don't have kiddush chayes. But we don't have kiddush chayes nowadays. Now l'maisa, it's best again that it's fully cooked, and it's best to go ahead and to cover, to have it gufa ketuma because of chazara. In other words, let's say you want to take something off. Let's say you want to move it on the fire. You run all sorts of problems if something is not fully cooked. Now there is an exception of where you don't need gufa ketuma, and that is by a hot water urn. Because a hot water urn is a unique item. Because a hot water urn, there are no knobs, and there's no blech. You can't even make a blech if you try. Your only option with a hot water maker is to have it fully cooked for Shabbos, which is the lechatchila. Ideally, you should put up the water before long enough before Shabbos, and that it's fully cooked. That's the way to do it. That's the lechatchila way to do it. Right, pashas, it should be a complete boil. Right, it should be fully cooked. It should be a complete boil. L'chayra, if you reached yatzaledes, l'chayra, you've already reached kamach ben jusai, because certainly at the chak, a tea which is 120 degrees is gone fine. Right, it's certainly not chali de chak. You can make tea, you can make coffee. It's not piping hot, but it's certainly enough. So ideally, it should be fully cooked. L'maisa, as long as it's yatzaledes, that's good enough. So many urns, I get this call sometimes right before Shabbos because I plug it in. Most of the urns, by the time Shkia rolls around, are going to anyway already be yatzaledes. But l'maisa, we're making.
HaRav, I have your Exhibit A, which is an urn, which the Chashva Eilim here in Zakail uses yom. So the Rav said that there's no knobs on an urn, right? So
I'm talking about the basic urns.
Here.
You have high and low. What do your knobs say on it?
No, it has keep warm and boil, number one. That's number one. It has two little electronic options that you can do, either keep warm or boil. I assume one is keep warm is Shabbos and boil is chayil, even though obviously only in Israel they have it marked that way. And the second is the reboil. So if you go into a store, this is what you're going to get. Does that change the metzius of an urn having no buttons? That's the shayla.
Good
Does
question.
it make it even worse? Because now all of a sudden, do I have to be gary from kaitim? Do I have to make a kera in the top? What do I have to do with these? With
So
these
I'm not aware. I'm not aware. I don't got to see because I don't see the actual computer. But I know I'm familiar with what you're saying. I don't, from my understanding, I'm not familiar with the fact that I'm not familiar that actually people are nice to cover those buttons on Shabbos. Even though you're asking a good kasha, if someone hits reboil, right, then l'char you have a knob, right, that someone might come to reboil it, right? But l'chayra
doesn't reboil mean basically Boil means on. Boil is turning it on. Lemaisa again, right? What does reboil mean?
Yeah, it's higher heat. I think though the svara there is that you're going to go with the svara to say that it's grufa ketuma. In other words, you're going with the svara that the
heating element is covered.
The heating element itself is covered. The H is covered, right? And therefore, that's it. You're done. And also, it's still different than the crock pot.
So it's like a blech that's not with the knobs and not covered.
Correct. Even though you're tining. Right. I think those buttons though serve a different purpose than on the crock pot. See, on a crock pot, it's a high and a low. In other words, there's a level of heat that exists. So there's a grufa when you stir it. Over here, pshat is the heat's maintained, right? It's maintained. You're happy. It's hot enough. Shalom Yisrael, you don't really have that need to reboil unless electricity goes out. You unplug it or something like that. But there a klal, who pushes the reboil button in general? I don't know. Ask the kohen the light. Do they hit the reboil? When do they ever hit the reboil other than they fill it with water?
It's as far as that the reboil is like a gzera that you're bringing new eitzim, and alzeh chazal we're not geyser. You're starting a new fire, chazal we're not geyser. You only geyser on shem yichat. You'll forget on the
exactly.
Since you don't have access to the heating element. We're not geyser on that.
Also, it's not really a knob. I mean, you're right. I could take a piece of tape and cover over the reboil, right? But it's not the same geschmack as pulling off the knob or taking a tape where you're covering a physical knob, which turns this up. I'm just talking now the mitzias. Here it's like kind of clumsy. You have this little button on there, which is basically flat on top of the urn, and you're putting a piece of tape on it. So again, I would assume that's why I'm not familiar that people are like to actually cover that. And misvara, the nafkamina would be between the knobs and this, and also there you're more saibach on the crack shaboy.
What happens if you have an outage for an hour?
Right, because it's too late. It's late. If you had an outage for an hour, and then the flame goes on, so the maisa we're makel, we don't consider that a maisa of amir la'akum. This is an interesting question here. If a guy cooks for you on Shabbos, then you can't eat the food, right? If a guy comes, let's say and I was going to talk about amir la'akum, and we have a few minutes to get into that. I'll get to that in 1 second. There's one other issue I wanted to speak about, and that is the tubes in front of the crock pots. I don't know if your Exhibit A has the tubes in front, but this is really a separate shaila. Is there a Maisa Bishul on the tubes in the front? Right. In other words, the indicator tube that's showing how much water do I have in my hot water maker. So if it's low, I know I got to fill it with water. Obviously not on Shabbos, right?
We have it right here. It's not
right here, exactly.
Into the.
So some have raised that if there's a physical issue, that when you put in the water inside the urn boils, and the tube is cold water because it never got heated. The only thing that got heated was what was inside. So we ran a test in the Star K. We ran a test. They put a dye into the tube water and saw that there's a mix. In other words, just like we know water mixes up, a lot of the tube water mixed in, and therefore eventually there's a transfer. All the water eventually gets cooked, and therefore pash is not a problem. However, and therefore also it stays warm as well because it's samuch to the flame. So Bishul, the shaila is on Shabbos morning. You want to take your coffee and you manually release the water from the urn. Then maybe at that point the indicator tube is releasing cold water. Are you being nispashal that water? That's the problem. So number one, you're not, because the waters are taruvus all the time. It was hot, it got in, and it remained warm. It doesn't have to remain yatsa lettuce. It has to, water in the tube has to remain warm. Pashas, it was so close to the crock pot. Pashas, it remained warm, and therefore there's no ma'isa bishul. There's some who are machmir.
Is it a psik reisha?
No, because you're not being nispashal. In other words, if the water in the tube was never cooked, or the water in the tube was cold, then it's a psik reisha that you're cooking. But the pshat is number one, the water in the tube may be mixing all the time anyway. So it was already nispashal. You're getting cooked water. In other words, you filled it up. So the first 10 minutes it was in the tube, but eventually it's going to mix in. So therefore, you're not taking problem water. Number two is that water in the tube that's been dispatched stays warm. So in other words, it's ein bishul achar bishul. There's no pick ratio here. You're taking the tube water and you're mixing it with the boiling water coming from your urn. You're basically mixing cooked water, which is still warm, with boiling water. No problem. That's 100% mutter. There are those who are makbir before Shabbos to release a little bit of water. In other words, you put the water up, it boils, and now when you release some water, that makes a better taruvas, because then already the tube water is released and it starts to mix better with the water, and therefore there are those who are machmir to go ahead and to do that in order to mix the water and create less of a problem. Now, I just want to, in the 5 minutes we have, I just want to talk about the din of Amir La'akum Nageya, these in Yanim. And that is Amir La'akum asking a guy to cook on Shabbos is Aser. Is Aser, right? It's a Mochadei Raisa, to turn on a flame is Aser. However, there's a machlokes apaiskim on Yontif. This is very, very negay on Yontif. There's a machlokes whether turning on a flame on Yontif is a deraisa d'rabbanan. Everybody knows it's mutter to turn on a flame, l'tzarech eichel nefesh, or l'tzarech, to put on a flame on Yontif from an existing flame. What if a person puts on a stam flame? You strike a match. So there are many that hold that that's only a malacha d'rabbanan on Yontif. Shabbos malacha d'oraisa. So on Yontif it's mutter to light a flame from an existing flame. Every person, every balabas is going to do that when they bench licht on Motzei Shabbos this week. Motzei Shabbos and Sunday night again, the Chutz La'aretz, you're allowed to light from an existing flame. That's clear. Lighting a flame out of the blue from a non-existing flame, Pashas, we go with the Shittas old malacha d'rabbanan. Rabbi Heinemann told me that's only malacha. He goes with the Shittas and hold that's a malacha d'rabbanan. It's a big machlokes malacha d'rabbanan. Once you downgrade that action to malacha d'rabbanan, now you've opened up worlds on Yontif, because there's a din on Shabbos. Let's go back to Hilchos Shabbos for a minute. Let's talk about Amir La'akum briefly. There's an Isra Amir La'akum. You're not allowed to ask a guy to do malacha for you. There are 3 reasons given for this prohibition. Number 1 is that it's daber davar, right? You're speaking in yonim of malacha. It's also to do that. Maybe one day we'll have the opportunity to give a share on daber davar, which is also in its own right. Business, malacha, money, airline tickets, airline fares, credit card deals. All of that's also to speak about on Shabbos. I'll daber davar. So if I ask you to do malacha on Shabbos, I'm over daber davar, right? Another reason is that I become a shliach for you. I'm your shliach. And the third reason is I might come to do it myself. The reason of shliach is very important, because that says even on today I can't tell you, do a malacha. Tell the guy today, come to my house on Shabbos and turn on my fire. That you can't do either, because he becomes a shliach. And therefore the halacha is it's aser. Amir la'akum on a d'rabbanan is mutter l'tzairich Shabbos or tzarich yontif. Or l'tzarich mitzvah. What's Echid Timsa? So if I have a d'rabbanan, right? I'll give you an example on Shabbos. You don't have lechem mishnah. You ran out of lechem mishnah, and you want someone. Your neighbor has lechem mishnah. You're in a city without an erev. Okay, from your neighbor's house to yours is only carmelis. It's only a carmelis. So you want someone to carry. You want to get a guy to carry the chalas from next door to your house. Mutter. It's a shvus to shvus for makayim. Shabbos here, you get the mitzvah Chamishah, Shabbos. I have a suda, or I need food. Right? I ran out of food. I don't have food. Your oven went off. You want cholent, so you want Einik Shabbos. You want to have cholent Shabbos. Mutter to ask a guy. It's a shvus to shvus. It's a d'rabbanan of a d'rabbanan. Amir La'akum is d'rabbanan, right? Carrying haitzah on Shabbos and a carmel is d'rabbanan. It's a tzarech Shabbos. It's mutter to ask the guy. If your flame goes out on Yontif, you can ask a guy to put the flame on. Your oven went out. Someone blew it out. The flame was low. Your electricity went out, and now your oven was turned off. You're allowed to ask a guy beferish on Yontif, not on Shabbos. Shabbos deraisa. Ben Hashmashas, you could ask a guy on Shabbos. I don't confuse you for a minute. Ben Hashmashas only d'rabbanan suffix Shabbos, or even another year. Let's say the wife was Makabel Shabbos, the husband wasn't, or the wife was Makabel Shabbos, the daughter wasn't, and it's still not Shkia yet, and the daughter was Makabel Shabbos, the wife said, oh, I forgot to turn on this oven. That's Friday afternoon. That's mutter. It's not Shabbos yet for them, 100% mutter. It's better ben hashmashas. Yontif, mibal turning on a flame is only d'Rabbanan. You're allowed to ask the guy to turn on the flame. 100% mutter. Because it's a shvus to shvus, amir la'akum, on a d'Rabbanan, b'makayim, Einik Shabbos, I want to have hot food yontiv. Allah is 100% mutter to go ahead and to do that. So that's an important kula. Now you can't ask the guy to cook the food. Remember, you don't want to have a Bishul over here. So if the guy is going to put the food in and it's a raw chicken, you now are going to have a Bishul issue, which is really something someone has to think about. Going back to Ben Hashmashas over here, if you have a raw chalent, if Ben Hashmashas Abir La'akam is mutter, L'tzarech Shabbos, right? Let's make it simple here. Sometimes people come over to me in shul Friday, let's say in the wintertime, after Ma'ariv, they come and they say, oh, they made a mistake in the house, they light off, the oven's not on. I said, why did you come over to me during Kabbalah Shabbos, right? Nach Tashkiya, certainly before the tzibur was Kabbalah Shabbos, it's Ben Hashmashas, it's not even, it's Kabbalah Shabbos. Go ahead, I could have told you right now, go get a guy, right? And turn on the flame. In that case, if the chalent was raw, if the chalent was totally raw, and the guy plugged in the crack pot, you're going to have a Bishul Hakam problem. No, it's Ben Hashmashas. 5 minutes after Shkia, right? We're holding in the middle of beginning of Chadaidi, right? 10 minutes after Shkia. Someone comes and says the crack pot was turned off. It's Ben Hashmashas. You could go quickly get a guy to plug in your chalent. If I haven't asked him, was your chalent cooked? Says no Bishul Hakam because it was edible. But if you have a raw chalent right now, right, and the guy is going to plug that chalent in, you're going to have Bishul Hakam problem. Right, they serve at chasanas, right? Wednesday and chasanas, Thursday and chasanas, right? You're going to have a big problem. So you can't have the guy actually cook the item for you because it's oil shochem malachim. So you could run into a Bishul Hakam problem. You certainly can't cook it. So again, one has to be mishayir in that case when they're asking a guy to go ahead and turn it on. One has to be careful in that case. So I was going to come Amir Lakum, but I want to leave one timsa here, and that is Amir Lakum is Aser. People run into a shaila. A lot of airlines, you can't get a boarding pass until 24 hours before. You can't get a seat until 24 hours before. Southwest Airlines, you can't get a place in line until 24 hours before. So if you have a flight, let's say Lamashal, that's on a Sunday morning at 10 a.m. on Southwest, okay, you can pay more to get a good spot, but otherwise you're going to get a middle seat. So what do? So I get to Shiloh sometimes, they want to ask a guy, they work with a guy, they give him the number, they go online, Shabbos morning, 10 a.m., they get themselves a boarding pass, they get a good spot, right? They get a good spot. That's Aser. Amir La'akam is mutter, even though it's not makam einig, it's makam mitzvah. Shvus, you ask a guy to do malacha, get online, right? Play with the computer. That's a shvus, but there's no tzarech Shabbos here. It's for Sunday, right? So you're turning on your electricity. In other words, you're doing a mice of electricity. You're turning on the computer, and I believe even with all I'm now coming back to when you were signing with Aschala, Rabbi Heinemann Shir, certain mice of mutter. That's where you come in the screen, but to sit and to hit the keyboard, right? That's Aser. So what do? So the eitzah is find someone in Australia who will get your boarding pass, right? In other words, in Australia, if your flight's 10 a.m., so in Australia, it's going to be, in Melbourne, it's going to be midnight, depending on the season. So they'll stay up, and at midnight, they're going to get in, right? By you, it's 10 a.m., you're in the middle, you're in Kriyas HaTorah over here, but it's mutter, because by them, it's not Shabbos. They're doing the Maisa, so it's 100% mutter for them to get the boarding pass. You'll get online, Motzei Shabbos, or you go to the airport on Sunday, get your boarding pass with a good spot. And therefore, that would be a case where it's mutter of Amir Yisrael to go ahead and do it on your behalf. Thank you very much. Take care. Have a good yontif.
I knew it's going to be. One second. Before the Rav goes, because
I can't hear you. You're phasing in and out. I can't hear you.
Came back. If you can't, then we'll just be Messiah.
I just heard right now. Start again. No, I missed it. Okay, the schus of being meichen properly for in Yonah Yontav, Yonah Shabbos. We should talk about Zoycha to have the achana and the coming up on Chodesh Sivan. We just crossed into Kemat in a few minutes at the Erev of Chodesh Sivan, officially this man of Simcha. It's also has to be time. It's ready from Chatzos, which extends through some shuls, the Isru Chag, others through Yud Beis. So Mamash will be in this man of Kabbalas HaTorah now for almost the next 2 weeks. And that schus of us being meichen for Kabbalas HaTorah, we should be able to be mekabel the Torah on a personal basis in our limud HaTorah. We should be oila limud HaTorah. Mitzvah Shabbat B'Yaskal Rabbi Amen Amen. A good Yontav, a good Shabbos. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Heber, and thank you everybody for coming. Rabbi Gassman is off the video. So we have a Chazar Shir tonight. See your emails, and we'll have Shirim the rest of the week. And have a good Yontav, Rabbi. Thank you.
Oh no, it's there.